Yeah, today's topic is actually one of my favorite topics lately. It's about management, and today I want to talk about this topic because I got inspired by my sister. She actually asked me about what must-have qualities a manager should have, and I think it's not easy to answer in half an hour, but I will try my best. So please prepare for an extended definition of what I think modern managers should be following, or what kind of principles there are that could be followed in terms of good management. I just randomly wrote down a few aspects that I think are important in this context. And when you speak of management, I think one of the traits a good manager nowadays should have is really being a good communicator, because in the end you gotta start to manage once you have team members, which are human beings usually. So a manager has to be able to communicate with team members, with human beings, and I think that's something that probably wasn't as important a few decades ago, or let's say 100 years ago, when the problem of management came up. But nowadays, especially with Generation X, Y, you gotta be able to motivate people. You gotta be able to also find out what drives people. So, and that means to communicate. Another aspect that is tied to it is, as I said, is motivation. So being able to communicate oftentimes also means to motivate, because in the end, when you are in a business environment and you have set goals, it's very important to be able to motivate people to follow goals, or to try their best to work towards company goals. And that's basically already one more aspect of good management, is actually to set goals, to be able to understand how can you reach company goals, what does it take to get there as a company. And tied to this is of course to have an understanding of what kind of resources do you have in the company that you can use in order to reach those goals. So in those last sentences I was already covering communication, motivation, and then of course also goal setting. So understanding business goals and also defining business goals is one of the most important aspects when it comes to management, because after all, an organization like a business is being built in order to follow goals that have been set usually by the management. There's also, of course, a distinction between managers that are founders in a company, or managers that have been hired from a founder. Then, of course, in a bigger company, you have maybe a middle management, and then the middle management has usually different, let's say, smaller goals that need to be aligned with overall company goals. But no matter if it's a business manager, as in a managing director or general manager, or if it's a team leader in a smaller team, those aspects are pretty similar. Tied to goals are probably KPIs, like key performance indicators, which are helping a business to, let's say, measure activities or smaller activities that work towards a bigger goal. In other other approaches towards this would be to talk about OKRs, like in this book, for example, that I've been reading lately. It's by John Durr. It's about measure what matters. OKRs, the simple idea that drives 10x growth. So this is basically inspired by the Google founders who came up with objectives and key results. So obviously objectives are bigger kind of goals that can be defined for a certain quarter, for example, or a year, and the key results are maybe smaller goals and activities that work towards bigger objectives. It's maybe just a slightly different way of organizing goals and objectives, speaking about key results and KPIs. In the end, behind all this is the idea of planning a business, setting goals, defining goals, and usually a good manager defines SMART goals. SMART goals means specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So being able to define SMART goals and align the team to be working towards those SMART goals is a very, very important quality of a manager, I would say. Maybe when it comes to communication and motivation, another aspect that is tied to it would be that you are able to work with a team. In the end, usually you do not only manage one person. In bigger companies, usually as a middle manager, you would lead like 5, 6, 7 people or even more, maybe 10, 15. And then you need to be able to build the team, motivate the team, inspire the team, and then, of course, discuss things that are going well and also discuss things that are maybe not going so well. And then also it depends on how you communicate this. If something goes wrong in a company, the way how you communicate issues or challenges that are coming up is pretty important. It's not only about what you are saying, it's also important how you convey the information. And I think nowadays it's very difficult to criticize people right away or straightforward, since I think criticism is not always or not usually the best way to motivate people to change their behavior. When it comes to management, of course, if you wanna change someone's behavior, you gotta make this person or the team think about their behavior and make them probably change their activities and their behavior towards a more positive one for the company. And I think from my experience, the best way to achieve this is by just asking the right questions. Asking why certain goals have not been met, what possible ways are out there to reach that goal if it hasn't been reached, or what kind of solutions can we come up with in order to meet those objectives that were set out. So it's almost like a philosophical journey to make the team members, the human beings, ask themselves, how can we be creative as a team, as a individual also, what can I do in order to make this whole company, this whole team more successful. Management is, I think, also usually very much tied to marketing. So in order to be able to sell your services and sell your products, managers probably need to have a good understanding of marketing. They need to be able to understand what the company is standing for, what are the USPs, the unique selling propositions, what separates the company from the competitors, or do we have competitors at all on the market? So this also requires, of course, to have a good market understanding, do market research, do know the competition, having knowledge about the environment, like the political environment, the social environment, maybe the natural environment, and so on. So for example, we have companies in the Philippines, and the environment in the Philippines is much different from the environment in Germany, for example, where you have a lot of good infrastructure. So you've got also a lot of talent, especially here in Munich. You've got awesome universities, which might not always be the case in a third world country like the Philippines, where you might have some areas in the country where you have a lot of good students and good employees or potential employees, but in other areas, like in the province, it's much more challenging to recruit good team members. So this is obviously an aspect that you would have to take into account if you, for example, want to hire good personnel in one of your departments that are important to your business. Then you might look into this kind of thing. Another thing that I guess is very important is the attitude, a positive attitude as a manager. Nobody wants to report to a grumpy person or someone who is always angry. I think being emotionally stable as a manager and to also be very resilient without getting angry at anyone or anything is pretty important. You've gotta be a leader that people wanna look up to. And so I was speaking of leadership. Some people would say that leaders and managers are sometimes different, or different kinds of characters and people. I don't think that. I believe that good managers should also be good leaders, and that means, to my mind, that they are able to control their emotions, especially when something like Corona, like the pandemic, comes up. Many businesses were facing a lot of challenges and issues, and this happens. Business also means to take risks, and sometimes the risks are difficult to calculate with, and businesses can go down, and of course it's not nice. You get into a lot of stress, things are getting rough, but nevertheless, in the end, it's just business. We should have or we should stay human beings that are overcoming the challenges together, and should not be looking for culprits and losing our attitude and adding negativity to the whole scenario. I was talking about leadership already, and when you talk about leadership in a business, there is the context of vision and mission. So Vision and mission is usually defined by, let's say, the founders of a company, but oftentimes manager and founder of a company is the same person. But even if it's not the case, if you hire an external manager, this person of course needs to know about the overall values, about vision and mission of the company, founders or founder. So being able to understand this is of course also very essential when it comes to the must-have qualities of a manager. That means not only looking at the bottom line and making money and making winnings. It's really, I think that modern companies try to put forward values that are not only tied to a business. It's really about adding value to human beings, to the world. Essentially, it doesn't only have to be human beings, can also be adding value to the environment, to animals, trying to maybe to preserve resources and nature and environment. Maybe another aspect when I speak of marketing, I think marketing is also very closely tied to sales. Good managers usually have also a good understanding of sales. They know the business, they know the unique selling propositions, and no matter if it's the CEO or a general manager, those guys should be able to sell your services and products that you offer as a company. Maybe one last aspect that I've noted down here before I head over to one of my favorite books would be the aspect of discipline. So I was already mentioning the quality of being resilient and being in control of your emotions. The aspect of being disciplined is closely tied to it, and how can you stay disciplined in your goal setting and in your attitude? I think the best way, to my mind, is to do a lot of sports, to go out, exercise almost every day, to also forget about issues and challenges, get into physical and also mental fitness, because this will help you a lot to stay focused and disciplined when it comes to rougher times. If you talk about management, one of the gurus of management theory is of course Peter Drucker, and in one of the previous videos that we have recorded, I was mentioning this as one of the most important books that I was reading last year. And usually I take notes and I mark some paragraphs and sentences, and just by browsing through some of the notes I took down, I can probably add some more qualities that a good manager should have nowadays. And when I just look at the first point, would be systematic time management. So time management is a tricky one, because some people nowadays would say that you shouldn't manage your time, you should rather manage priorities. And I think it's also a combination of both. Like when I speak of OKRs, like the objectives and key results, of course it's always important to understand what the most pressing points, what the priorities are in every moment. So this can also change from day to day, but if you know in a business that, let's say, you have 3 most important objectives in a quarter, then you should be mostly working on those. And that also means to set aside a lot of time in order to reach those goals that you set out, or that you get those objectives done and check them off the list. Another one would be delegation. To be able to delegate as a manager is not easy, because delegating important tasks and responsibilities means that you can trust the person, and sometimes, especially when you start with delegating, this can be a tricky thing, and it has to be learned. Some tasks can be delegated, some other tasks cannot be delegated, like the decision making, for example. Decision making, especially when it comes to big decisions, cannot be delegated. That has to be done by the manager. I took down another note, which is relationship building. So business is a lot also about relationship building, and I think if you are a manager of a bigger company, then you're also representing the company to the outer world, and then I think it's very important to have networking skills. Maybe just a couple last points, then I think I have almost filled the 30 minutes. She's already sleeping.
She has to memorize this.
Concentration or focus. So there are so many different tasks coming in when you are a manager. I think sometimes it's overwhelming, but the bigger the company grows, the more tasks will end up on your desk. So this goes back to being able to to prioritize, get the most important things done first, or first things first. But that also means to focus on the most important things, and do not get lost in some side battles and fight on some frontiers that are coming up, but that are not essential to the success of your team or your business. So being able to concentrate and focus is, of course, another very important aspect. I was mentioning already the decision making. So a good manager is able to also make important decisions fast. That doesn't mean that you have to be able to make a decision within seconds, but of course bigger decisions require some sort of preparation and weighing pros and cons against some other options. But what I've learned in the past years is that when you manage a team or a business, you gotta be able to make faster decisions, and by making decisions on a more regular base and by getting used to making decisions, you become better. I know many other company owners or self-employed people who always dream of doing things, but businesses do not thrive on dreams. They usually thrive on taking action towards fulfilling those dreams. So and that usually requires to making decisions in a fast but also usually very intuitively strong way. That doesn't mean that you never make mistakes. Better make some mistakes along the way and learn from them, instead of trying to always make a perfect decision but actually never get into taking action. Actually, this is one of the maybe most important parts that I haven't covered yet. In the end, is self-development. So self-development and personal development, probably one of the most important things as a manager or leader whatsoever. You gotta learn every day. learn, educate yourself, learn new skills. For me, the best way is always to read more good books. And I can also highly recommend this to everybody, not only to managers or business owners. It should be done by the whole organization. Every team member needs to work on themselves and do everything to develop yourself, develop your skills, not only when it comes to business. Try to become a more complete human being, a social, physical and psychological, spiritual entity that is happy to learn every day and grow. So I hope this was of some use to to get a better idea of how good management might look like, or what the must-have qualities might be. I'm always happy for suggestions, and leave your comments if you think that I have missed anything important.